That bothered me. Bothered me a lot. I'm sitting there reading this, and the reason why it bothered me was because I had been asking for years, Christians, why are you a Christian? And they would say tradition, and I'd say not good enough. And now I'm reading this book, the Bible, it's the same thing. John the Baptist is saying tradition is not good enough. He's agreeing with me. In all those years that I had sort of put Christians on the back foot, none of them got the chance to ask me, why are you a Muslim? And I had given them my reasons, by the way. I gave them all my evidences and my arguments, but they didn't ask me personally, why is it so important to you? And the answer was tradition. I was supposed to be that. So that day I decided I am going to follow whatever is true, tradition or not. John the Baptist's words got me thinking, or got me realizing, that I have this confirmation bias and I ought to see things as objectively as I can. But now you're faced with the problem, because the Quran and the Bible don't say the same things about a lot of things. They say a lot of the same things in some areas, but in the key important areas they don't. Because the central heart of the biblical message is that human beings have sinned, and we all sin, and we have a fundamental sin nature, and that sin nature prevents us from doing things that would please a God who is the standard of justice and perfection. And so we need someone who's not us to save us from us. But Islam says that we do need God's forgiveness. I mean, it calls him oft-forgiving, most merciful. It's one of the most common things about God in the Quran. But that mercy is in fact earned. You have to do good works. Your good deeds need to outweigh your bad deeds, and if they do, then you'll go to heaven. I spent a lot of time trying to harmonize these two books. And as I was looking into it, more and more, I'm looking into the history of this. I began to look and to see, okay, is the Bible actually telling me true things about Jesus? What he said, and then what he did. And as over the course of the years, as I was studying this stuff, I began to see something, that not only is the Bible preserved in telling me what happened in history, but it's corroborated by actual history.
So you hear what he said. All these things he said, and they are true. So it bothered him really because he realized that tradition couldn't save anyone. So he was when he started out debating Christians, he was actually asking why they believed. And it was all about tradition, because they were saying that it was tradition because they were born in Christian families, and so they ended up being Christians themselves. They had no any other option. They didn't even care to look into it. They just followed it the way their parents also were going with it. And now going back to himself, he realized at that moment that what John the Baptist said struck him. And so he realized that he had to also assess himself and see what he believed. And I tell you, amazingly, it happened to be the same thing as the Christian guys he was also condemning. It happened to be tradition, that same tradition. He was saying to the Christian guys that was not enough, was the same thing that kept him being a Muslim. And so he made a decision that he was going to, and I believe that is the right thing to do. Everyone needs to make this decision. It's a personal thing. We have the responsibility to make a choice of where our lives are going to end. Our souls are very precious, Muslim or Christian. We know that it's a gift from God. And the soul is going to live on after this body dies. And so you must really pay attention to your soul, where it's going to end up. It's your responsibility. It's not the responsibility of your father. It's not the responsibility of your friends. It's your responsibility. How it's going to end up, it depends on you. So what decision are you going to be making from today hence? What decision are you going to be making? Are you going to be like my brother Abdul here, who later realized by reading the book of John, by reading the Bible and realizing that he had to make a decision about where his life is going to end? So we all have to ask ourselves this question. And so he made a decision to seek the truth. And the truth was what he stood for. So he made a decision that he was going to follow the truth. And that was the beginning of his journey. So, my brothers and sisters, you have to also make that decision yourselves. Where you want to end up, where do you want to end up? The place you're going to end up will be for you to decide. So decide today. Your soul is at stake. And so you have to really determine. If you haven't been taking the business of your soul so seriously, you should try to do that starting today. Sit down and think. If it will take you to begin to check all of these two major religions we're talking about, Christianity and Islam, to see which one best fits what you are looking for in the way of salvation, then I would strongly suggest you start doing that today. Because eventually, this is going to end. This life in this world is going to end. And the place we end is going to be dependent upon the choice we make today. Okay, so let's go on.
Areas they don't. Because the central heart of the biblical message is that human beings have sinned, and we all sin, and we have a fundamental sin nature, and that sin nature prevents us from doing things that would please a God who is the standard of justice and perfection. And so we need someone who's not us to save us from us. But Islam says that we do need God's forgiveness. I mean, it calls him oft forgiving, most merciful. It's one of the most common things about God in the Quran. But that mercy is in fact earned. You have to do good works. Your good deeds need to outweigh your bad deeds, and if they do, then you'll go to heaven. I spent a lot of time trying to harmonize these two books.
Just like he said, the Quran talks about what the Bible also talks about in some ways. The Quran talks about the forgiveness of sin. The Bible also talks about the forgiveness of sins. But these two religions have different approach to these things, how they are done, how they are obtained. So Islam says that first of all, yes, forgiveness of sin, we all need forgiveness of sin because we are sinners. But how you get that forgiveness of your sin is that God is merciful, and so God is going to forgive you if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds. God can choose to forgive you. So your good deeds have to outweigh your bad deeds. But Christianity, on the other hand, says a different thing. Christianity says you cannot earn your forgiveness before God because all your actions are like filthy rags before God. Whatever good thing you think you do is not anything as compared to the standard of God's holiness can ever be. Not anything close. The book of Isaiah tells us the same thing. All our righteousness is as filthy rags before God. Filthy rags. It's not talking about our sin. It's talking about all our righteousness. Whatever good thing we think we will do is like filthy rags before God. This is why you should know that no man can obtain God's mercy by what they do. If you think you can do a righteous act, then I tell you, I promise you that you can do one righteous act today, and what follows will be 100 unrighteous acts. I bet you that. Because that's how humanity is. That's how humanity is wired by virtue of the sin nature he inherited by my father and your father, by our parents, Adam and Eve. We inherited this sin. We inherited this sin from Adam, and that's what makes us sinners. So you and I cannot earn it. That's what Christianity says. Your goodness cannot save you. What saves you is God's mercy. But how you get that mercy is not by what you do. How you get it is by receiving the substitutionary work of Jesus Christ on the cross of Calvary for me and you, which God had done. God had done this through Jesus Christ. God became a man and he died for my sin and your sin, because the wages of sin is death. You and I deserve death because we are sinners. And so nothing can wipe that sin away apart from we being killed for it, because that's what we deserve. It's like you and I are arrested for thievery. And let's say the law for thievery as a capital offense is death. So you and I are going to be killed. And so the other person says, no, okay, so I'm just going to beg the judge and tell the judge that, okay, fine, I did good deeds in the past. And so the judge should look at those things I did in the past and save me from them. It doesn't work that way. Even in our own natural court of law, we know that's what happens. God is a just God, and that's why he will not do a thing like that. Sin must be paid for. And so the only way that sin should be paid for, that the man God loves will not die or will still be preserved and be with God, is only if there is someone who pays for that man's sin. And that's where Jesus Christ comes in. So God became a man. He dwelt among us so that he could take this sin. He never committed any sin, and that was what made him qualified. The Quran's record of Jesus Christ as a sinless man is evident. It's what the Quran says. Jesus is the sinless person that ever lived. And so he was qualified to take away, because it only takes a person who never committed a particular offense to save a person who has committed a particular offense. If I haven't stolen before and another person has stolen and they need someone who can save that person from death, I can choose to give up my life. Why? Because I am an innocent person. I am not guilty of theft like the other person is. So that's how it is. God has also shown us how these things play out even in the world we live. And so I don't think it should be something very difficult for us not to comprehend. And that's how it is. God made it this way. So Jesus Christ came, and it is by him that we obtain God's mercy, not the Islamic way. But you look into it, my brother. Do you believe this is something worth looking into? I will strongly suggest you look into it, because it is what saves you. Think about these things I'm saying. And I believe you will eventually find out that all these things are the truth. Compare them with nature and see how things are done in the world and in the law courts today. That's how God operates.